Oh, all right. Awesome. Welcome everyone to week 5. And today we are going to be talking about our environment, mastering your environment and how we can use our environment to push us towards our goals, how to improve our motivation, and how this will relate back to everything else that we've been working on for these last several weeks. So when I Google the word environment, the definition, I got two very specific and different answers. The first answer from the Cambridge Dictionary says environment is the air, water, and land in or on which people, animals, and plants live. A very basic definition of what many people would consider when they think of environment. However, the second definition from Merriam-Webster is the definition I'm more concerned with. The environment is the circumstances, objects, or conditions by which one is surrounded, right? So it goes beyond just the things, but it's conditions as well. All right, so we're always starting with awareness and just understanding what's going on here, right? So when you think of, what do you think of when you hear the word environment? Again, a lot of people might think of their surroundings. Environment is like the outdoors, it's trees, it's the sky, it's the air. Maybe your cubicle at work is your work environment, or your desk, your home we think of as our environment, right? That's the environment that I live in. These are pretty obvious ones. And I add to this, right? So you are what you eat, but you're also what you watch, what you listen to, what you see, what you hear, touch, feel, everything. You see on this little cartoon here, if this, I might be dating myself, but in the 1980s, there's a cartoon called Captain Planet. Earth, wind, fire, water, heart, all combined made Captain Planet. Just like all the things that go into us, what we watch, listen to, see, hear, our house, yes, the environment around us, the trees, the sky, all of this stuff is what makes up us, right? So that's why when we hear environment, we can't only strictly use that first definition, that definition of just like the earth and the things that are physically around us, right? Because it is that. It is our surroundings. It is, the nature and the outdoors. It is our cubicle at work. It is your home, but it's also your phone, the apps, right? The things we interact with. It's what you watch on TV. It's also what you listen to in your headphones. It's your refrigerator and what's inside of it. It's your spouse, your coworkers, your commute to work, and much, much, much more, because it is literally everything that you interact with on a day-to-day basis makes up your environment. Everything that goes into either your ears, your eyes, or your mouth, right? So anything you hear, you see, or you eat, that is part of your environment, right? So like I said in the previous slide, things like the apps that you use on your phone make up your environment, right? If you're scrolling Instagram for X hours a day, if you're watching YouTube for X hours a day, if you're using whatever app you're using, that's part of your environment. The TV channels that you watch, the shows that you watch specifically, the advertisements that you see while you're watching those shows, those are all coming into your eyes and your ears and part of your environment. And everything counts, right? Aristotle said, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We are the sum of all of these things put together, right? And the reason that I'm emphasizing this, if you might realize that we started very internally at the beginning of this program, right? Week 1 was stories and self-talk. And then we got to habits and creating goals, and then time. And now we're all the way outside of environment. So we started inside our own heads, and now we're working out to everything else that's around us, right? So your environment is everything besides me, everything that I take in, but it still affects me, right? And this is all comes into motivation because it all counts, right? It is all a part of the things that affect us. And we have to take this into account, because if not, if we try to only care about the internal stuff, right? Like I'm going to have a good control of my self-talk, and I have my time management down, and I have good goal setting, and I built healthy habits. If we don't take into account the stuff outside of us, we are again setting ourselves up for failure, because that stuff invariably inevitably affects us. There is no way around that. There is no way to stop our interaction with the outside world, right? No man is an island. We live in a society where we interact with other people, we interact with other things. There is no way to get away from that. So, and if you do not take that into account, again, this is setting ourselves up for failure. And as we know, we've covered a million times learned helplessness. And the more we set ourselves up for failure, the more we fail, the more we want to quit, the more we stop before we even get started, right? So this is again just removing those roadblocks. This is again just removing those roadblocks and allowing us to get out in front of it when we understand that our environment is a huge factor in either our success or our failure. So to emphasize this, I want to tell you a story about the secret spy study and a concept called the emotional contagion. Basically, this study was done by a psychologist who wanted to study how humans interact. And she set up these fake kind of business meetings where they were kind of like boardroom meetings and set groups of people up with a task. And the task was you had to kind of argue a different point. So, maybe there's like a new machine that the business is supposed to buy, and one side of the room had to argue for it and one side of the room had to argue against it. And the people in this study thought that that was the study. They thought that the point was like trying to argue and win the game. But what they didn't realize was that there was a secret spy in the group in each one. And this study was repeated many different times. And each time the secret spy was given a specific emotion to try to kind of put out, but very subtly, right? So one day he might have been tired, where he kind of was just like, oh, and just like lackadaisically sat there. And the other days he was super happy and, really involved in the conversation. And other times he was a dick and he would just like kind of, like, and do things like that. And what they found was that the secret spy's emotion had a great effect on the entire group and the results from the experiment. And that's where they got the name emotional contagion. Basically, this one person, his emotions spread throughout the entire group and changed the outcome of each study. So in the studies where the spy was happy, all of the group members became a little bit happier. They worked together better and they came to a better conclusion, right? Because again, the entire game was who can get the other side to cave first in terms of like, oh, should we buy it? Should we not? What price should we pay? And the same thing when when the secret spy was a little bit angrier or was being a dick, it kind of spread to everyone else and they would get more hardened and were less likely to work together. And it changed the aspect. I mean, it changed the ending part of the study. Same thing when the guy was more tired, they were all more lackadaisical. And the basic point is that this one person was able to affect everyone around him. So why am I telling you this? Well, one, because it shows the power of your environment, that having just one person or thing or something in your environment that is affecting you, it affects us more than we realize. But that's the real point I want to make, is that it affects us without us realizing, right? So the second part of the study, which is more interesting to me, was that afterwards they interviewed all the participants and they asked them about, like, why were you doing this? Why did you feel this way? And almost 100% of them said nothing about the person in the room, meaning they didn't realize that they were being swayed by this person, by this emotional contagion. They didn't realize that that, like, even though they were a little bit more grumpy, they didn't see the connection that it was because of the guy sitting in the corner acting like a grump. Even though they were a little bit happier, they didn't realize that it was because of the guy who was being extra cheerful and happy, right? They just thought like, oh, I was just happier today, I was just grumpier today. They didn't see that connection. So this is important because, again, not only does our environment affect us, it affects us in ways that we do not realize, and that it's always happening and we do not make the connection. We're just like, oh, well, like I was just a little bit down today. But in reality, it could be something outside of us that is making that happen. And come back to what I was just saying before about, now, if we fail too often, we don't want to try anymore. So if I feel like I'm failing because it's just like, well, I just keep trying and I'm not getting anywhere, then that's a reason that we're going to end up quitting, right? But if there's something in our environment that is leading to us not being able to get the result we want, we could change the environment and that would change the outcome. But we have to understand first and accept that the environment is a vital factor in moving forward. So this is why this is so important. On average, each day, and again, this is average of Americans, and these numbers, I obviously have not done these tests myself, but these are, pretty standard. You can, I don't really doubt any of this stuff. But on the average American spends 2 to 3 hours watching TV. So that's 3+ hours on the weekends, 2+ hours on weekdays. We spend 5.5 hours on our phones and about 50 minutes commuting. This was obviously prior to COVID, but whatever, and that's 26 minutes each way. So again, understanding that our environment is what we watch on TV. It is what we look at on our phones. It is the music that we're listening to when we're commuting, or the things that we pass by, right? If I commute via car versus commuting via train versus commuting via walking, those are going to be different environments that I have to go through on my way to and from work each day. And the commute is a big one because, again, assuming a regular work week where we're going to and from work 5 times a week, that's a lot of interaction between our environment and us. And then also in that time, right, in those 2 to 3 hours of watching TV, 5.5 hours on our phones, it's estimated, again, these are just estimates, but that we see about 5,000 to 10,000 advertisements. And advertisements, again, being part of our environment, but they are even more nefarious because they're actually trying to push us in one direction, right? So our environment is always swaying us one way or the other, whether we realize it or not. But advertisements are obviously trying to do that, right? Like, a coffee shop that I walk by, it might smell good, but it's not reaching out to me. Whereas an advertisement is actively trying to change my behavior. So it's just something to be conscious of when we really start to get into this stuff and understand that, like, whoa, it's like so much of my time and energy is being spent on things that are actually actively trying to control me, right? Think social media, think TV shows, think even, again, the music you listen to. If you're listening to Spotify and the ads pop up every now and again, YouTube ads they play, they're all trying to get us to buy something, get us to do something, right? There is something that all of this stuff is pushing us towards. Next study that I want to talk about is another very interesting one about environment. So this study was conducted by a Harvard psychologist. And basically what she did was she took a bunch of people from an old age home and moved them into a new place. But what they did was they created an environment where the place where they were moving into was made to look like the environment that those men had grown up in 20 years prior. Meaning these men were all about in their 70s, men and women were all in their 70s or so, and they mimicked what their homes or what a building would have looked like 20 years prior when all of these people were in their 40s and 50s. So they did this really to a T. They had, all the newspapers were from 20 years ago. All the shows that were on the TV were from 20 years ago. The music was from 20 years ago. And they encouraged the people to even speak as if they were that age. They took away all mirrors so that they couldn't actually see their true age and replace them with photos of these same people when they were younger. And they had these people live here, I think for just like a week or two. And they tested them before they went in and after. And they tested them for things like, their blood markers, their strength, their agility, their mood, and things like that. And it was shown that after just a week in this altered environment, everything improved. They basically, not literally, but to all outward appearances, became younger. They became stronger. Their balance improved. Their agility improved. People were asked to look at pictures of them when they first came in and then when they left. They took pictures of them in both conditions. And the people who were independent observers chose the second week picture as being 10 to 15 years younger than the first week picture, right? So these people, like, it's again, obviously you're not actually anti-aging, but the environment that these people were in changed them so much psychologically that it actually had physical implications on their body, on their health, and more. The reason I'm telling you all this is, again, just to emphasize how real and important this stuff is. That if changing your environment can literally be almost an anti-aging device, right? We have to think about what is happening when we are not in an environment where that's so specifically curated like this one was, because again, they specifically curated this environment. But when we go throughout our day, each and every day, when we go throughout our life, we are just walking through an environment that we do not normally take any control of. We're not even noticing the things that are happening. But like I said before, with the ads, if you think about, if you're walking down the street, how many advertisements are you seeing? I don't know, unless you live in a small, like non-city town, but if you live in a city, there are billboards, there's cars with, taxis with the advertisements on them. There's flashing signs, there's storefronts, there's trucks, there's everything going on. And all of these things are your environment, and it's influencing you in one way or the other. And the last example of environment that I want to bring up is Berardi's first law of nutrition. This fine young gentleman right here is a man named John Berardi. John Berardi is a doctor of something. I don't know. He created a company called Precision Nutrition, and Precision Nutrition is, to me, the premier nutrition coaching company in the health and fitness space. I am a precision nutrition coach certified for many years, and he's just a very, very smart guy. He's an author, he's a public speaker, and he just is all around really smart. But he has what he calls Berardi's first law of nutrition. Berardi's first law of nutrition basically states, if a food is in my house, either I or someone I love will eat it. And Berardi's second law of nutrition is that if I do not want to eat a food, or I do not want me or someone I love to eat it, I will not keep it in my house, right? And all of this, now this is a cheeky weight loss thing, for people who are trying to diet. Obviously, that's what his company does, but it speaks to the power of environment. When we are continually around something, when it isn't in our environment, it affects us in ways no matter if we want to or not, right? So we've spoken about this in previous weeks about willpower and self-control and things like that. And we always have this idea of like, oh, I just need more willpower. I just need more self-control. And that very well may be true. But instead of trying to lean on our willpower, which is a finite resource, because we only have so much times we can say no before we say yes, right? If any of you have kids or small nephews or nieces or something like that, what do? They ask you, you say no. They ask you, you say no. They ask you, you say no. And then finally they ask you the 7th time or the 700th time, and you go, okay, all right, here, take the thing, take the cookie. I don't care. You just want to placate them. And that's how it is with our willpower with something like food, right? I can walk by, open my freezer and see ice cream, but take out a piece of broccoli once, and then maybe twice, and maybe 3 times. But eventually I'm going to see that thing and I'm going to eat it because my willpower has run low. Instead of me trying to use my willpower, I could alter the environment and not have the ice cream in my freezer, because then it makes it impossible for me to do that, right? So now it's not about me as much as it is about the environment around me. It's about the thing that's inside my refrigerator, inside my freezer, but it is having a direct effect on me. It is not controlling me, right? Like I'm still in control of my actions and my decisions. However, by influencing my environment, by changing the way I grocery shop, by changing what I keep in my house, I'm changing the amount of willpower that I have to have if I'm trying to diet. So all of that was just to explain the importance of environment, right? Because again, we've spoken a lot about things like, again, the mental mindset. We've talked about time management. We've talked about affirmations and self-talk and all the things that start with us in order to bring out that motivation from inside of us. But environment, it kind of flips that, because it's nothing that's inside of us. It's everything that's outside of us. So we can sometimes feel like we don't have anything to do with that, either because it doesn't affect us, so we don't have to worry about it, or if it does affect us, there's nothing that we can do about it, right? For some things, like I said, it's easy enough to not buy ice cream to keep in the fridge. However, when you're talking about your coworkers or your spouse or your kids or your house, because you can't just up and move your house because it's next to a McDonald's or something like that, then these things become a little bit more tricky. But the answer, as is always the answer, as will always be the answer, is to be proactive. If there's one thing you learn from this entire course, it is that being proactive is the answer for all of our problems. That's really what this entire course has been about. All I'm trying to do is illuminate to you the problems that most people face, right? That's how if you might have realized this already, but if you haven't, I hate to break it to you, but I named this course, flip your motivation switch, but there is no way to do that. There is no way to just turn on your motivation like it's a spout spraying from the earth, right? What we can do is understand all of the things that usually get in the way of us being motivated. Things like poor self-talk, things like poor time management, things like failure, things like all this other stuff, things like our environment, and now proactively get out in front of them and change them before it becomes a problem. So now with our environment, that is still the answer, right? We need to take back control and plan ahead. Whenever we are in that moment, as I said before, willpower is finite. Whenever we are in that moment, it's probably too late to do the change. Meaning, when I open the freezer and the ice cream is there, now I'm relying solely on willpower. Now it's too late. The change or the thing needed to be done before I even got there. It needed to be done when I was grocery shopping and say no to the ice cream, right? Another one, I go back to what I was talking about the commute before, right? Your commute to work. A lot of people, they have the same route they take to work every day. And maybe when you're walking to work, you always pass by that donut shop or the bakery. And every time you pass by that bakery, you smell the beautiful bakery things that come out of it because they smell so good. And trust me, that's done on purpose. Bakeries smell good and that air wafts out so it can attract you in because, again, this is your environment affecting you. If you walk by that bakery every day, 5 days a week, for X many years, you could say no and no and no and no and no, and eventually you're going to say yes. Easier than trying to rely on your willpower and to try to fight against human nature. Human nature is there are certain things that we crave: salty, sweet, fatty, right? Bakery foods, things like that. There's a reason they don't just taste good for no reason. Like, they are literally, we crave them at a deep evolutionary level. And that's something I can explain to you at a different time, but we crave these things, right? So rather than trying to fight human nature and continue to walk the same route past this place, what if I just changed my route? What if I just went a block around? What if I took the train to a different stop and then walked back instead of taking the train here and walking past the thing? Maybe none of these things are the easiest. However, it's all about, again, getting out in front of the problem, seeing something. Hey, every time I try to do X, Y, and Z, this happens. Every time I try to get up and go to the gym after work, I get sucked into another episode of Netflix. Okay, so my environment, let's change that. Can I turn the TV off? Can I move the TV? Can I take it out of my room? Can I do so? Like, again, I don't know how. It all depends how determined you are to make the change. But again, the point is that you do not wait until you're in that moment to try to do it. Your environment is extremely powerful, just like your habits are extremely powerful. And we need to get out ahead of it and be taking the action before the problem rears its ugly head, right? Like John Berardi says, we don't even want the food in the house if we're trying not to eat it. So you need to be curating your environment all the time. Again, it just comes down to that simple word: being proactive. You are in charge of all of these things. And that's why I spent so long in the beginning just kind of emphasizing all these different things, right? Your environment is so much. It is not just one thing. And explaining the importance of that with those different studies, right? The SPY study, the old age study, those things, the reason I explain that is because I want you to understand how much this stuff matters and how much it influences you, whether you realize it or not, right? There's a reason that the first thing I had you do week 1 was write down affirmations on sticky notes and put them around your house. What was that doing? Literally changing your environment. Okay. Those like I used to make fun of those like kitschy little cat posters, like just hang in there and things like that. But stuff like that actually matters. Changing your phone background is a great one, right? If you want to be motivated, change your phone background to something that says something motivational. Change to or just a reminder, like, hey, get up and walk, something like that. The more we can take advantage of these things, the better. Because understand, none of these are a cure-all, right? Me telling you to put up 3 sticky notes around your apartment did not change your life. Me putting up, me telling you to put up a few, me telling you to put up a few sticky notes around your apartment did not change your life. Me telling you to not buy ice cream does not stop you from eating ice cream. It just makes it a little bit harder. It makes it a little bit more friction because you have to go out and get it. In the same way that having those affirmations posted around your room does not make you all of a sudden no longer depressed or just the happiest person in the world, but it adds something in your environment that's pushing you in the direction that you want to go to, right? So when we're curating our environment, we want to be just looking at everything, and we have to understand we're looking at everything and seeing, is this moving me closer to where I want to be, or is this moving me farther from where I want to be? And we simply make decisions based on that, and then we can add things based on moving us closer to the ultimate goal, right? And so again, this includes foods in your fridge and in your kitchen and your pantry, right? If we're talking about weight loss or some type of health goal, then that very much so matters, right? So this can be hard because some people are live and they don't live by themselves, right? And they're like, I have a different diet than my kids or my spouse or my family or something like that. And I understand that makes it much harder. So what can we do? We can do things like hiding this stuff, right? So again, if the cookies are sitting right on my front counter, every time I walk by it, I guarantee by the end of the day, I'm going to have snagged a cookie. At least I can put it up in the cabinet on the top shelf far away, where if I do want to get to it, it's still there, but I have to climb on a step ladder. I have to climb all the way to the back of the pantry and rustle through stuff and, get it done, whatever, and get it. So it adds just a little bit more friction to the thing, right? Same thing with your decorations, your affirmations, all of this stuff matters. The stuff that you see, right? So if I'm in my room every day and I see the motivational posters, the affirmations, the things, that has to have some type of subconscious effect on my day-to-day activities. And that's why affirmations are so powerful, because they do. So now we can use that to our advantage, right? Also, your environment are the things and the people that you follow on social media. And this has to do with YouTube. It has to do with Facebook. It has to do with Instagram. As I said before, we spend about 5 hours on our phones. The vast majority of that is scrolling on apps like social media apps. So all of the media that we're taking in this medium is directly a part of our environment, right? It's no coincidence that fitness and being healthy and stuff like that has become much more en vogue in the last 10 years. It is a big part of because of social media, which is a great thing, because people follow fitness people and they get inspired and they see what people can do and they want to imitate them or mimic them or whatever. That's great. But we also have to realize that just like it can be a force for good, it can be a force for bad. So we want to just think about this stuff. Again, I'm just trying to bring your awareness to it, because again, that's the first step. Awareness is always the first step. We also need to think about our route to work, right? Are we driving and, I stop at Starbucks every day on my drive to work and buy an egg sausage McMuffin and a large coffee. Okay. Like, what if you made your coffee first and then didn't go to Starbucks, and you would save money and a bunch of calories or something like that? I don't know the answer. All I'm saying is that these things are a part of everything, right? I go back to that slide in the very beginning. We are the sum. We are the sum of all of our parts. Every little thing matters, and that's the real point I'm trying to make here. And then the last thing is the people. The people in your life are the biggest part of your environment, right? We saw the spy affected people when they didn't even realize that they were being affected. Your spouse, if you're always trying to better yourself, and your boyfriend or girlfriend or your mom or your dad or your brother or sister is always like, oh, that's never going to work, you're never going to do that, they're always Debbie Downering you, that person is hampering your growth. And that, whether you believe them or not, they could say like, oh, you're never going to do it, blah blah blah, or why do you even try, like whatever. Some people are just built like that, and even though you might not believe them, you might say, no, I know I am going to do it. Just hearing that over and over still affects you, right? And that's why this stuff is so important, because that was the point of the whole spy story, is that even though we might say like, yeah, like I know that they're always saying that like that I can't do it, or like they're always saying that like, who entrepreneurs all fail, or say restaurants, right? I want to start open a restaurant. What did my family say? Oh, you know that 80% of all restaurants fail in the first year, right? You know how hard it is to open a restaurant, right? You know how much money do you have saved up? You know that's almost impossible, right? Like I can in my head believe like, no, I can still do this, but all of those little things are going to subconsciously still be in the back of my head, right? Just like our own self-talk plays on the tape. We've talked about that enough times. Other people's speech to us gets downloaded into that same tape just as much as possible, just as much as our own self-talk. It's just that we have more self-talk than we talk to other people. But if it's someone that's always in your life, a boss, a coworker, a spouse that you talk to a lot, their words matter very highly to us, even subconsciously. So that's why we have to curate our environment, including the people that we hang out with, meaning sometimes cutting negative people out of our life, or sometimes speaking to them less, right? If I have a family member who I know every year at Thanksgiving, we just get into arguments, maybe I just don't talk to them at Thanksgiving. Maybe I just try to stay away, because that does have an effect. As much as I want to be able to say like, oh, I'll just talk to them and I'll just ignore what they say. Right. That's what we was like, oh, like it's not a big deal. They can have their opinion. Like I'll just ignore it. But we have to realize that downloads into our subconscious. We can ignore it consciously, but subconsciously, it's still dictating our future decisions. And now, a very important thing here that remember, and we've talked about this in previous classes, but we have what's called spheres of influence. The spheres of influence are highly important at this point in the course, because a lot of people look at environment as something outside of their sphere of influence of control, right? So we have the outermost sphere is concern, then we have influence, then we have control. And as I've spoken about before, we should only be focusing on what we can control, because that's where our energy is most efficiently used. There's lots of things that concern us, there's lots of things that affect us, but if we can't control them, then to focus our time and our energy there doesn't do us any service. So a lot of people naturally assume that our environment is in that outermost sphere of concern. Like, oh yeah, well, it would be cool to change. I understand maybe that it affects me, but there's nothing I can do about it. And we always have to push back a little and say that sometimes that is the case, right? We can't choose our family, but we can choose how we interact with them. We can't choose maybe where we work, but we can choose, again, aspects of what we do. We can, if we, some people are saying like, oh, I don't like to be on social media, but I have to for work, right? I'm a social media marketer, I'm an influencer or something like that. Okay. But we can choose the ways and the times and the mindset that we go into it with, right? When we're interacting. The point I'm trying to make with this is just that while we can't control every aspect of our environment, right? Again, like I said before, maybe I want to lose weight and I don't want to have ice cream, but my sister always buys ice cream and I can't stop her from doing that. So there's certain things that might be out of our control with that. But that doesn't mean that we give up right at that point, right? Remember, it's not just yes or no. It's not all or nothing. It's the gray area here. So if this is where, I have no ice cream in the house, no cookies, no snacks, no anything, because that's what tempts me. And I know that willpower is finite. So I'm just not going to bring them in the house anymore. And this is where, I have no control over my grocery shopping because someone else in my family does it and they buy all of the unhealthy things and it tempts me all the time. And there's nothing I can do about it. Like, what's all in between here? Maybe we could have a talk with our family about the benefit and value of changing our dietary routines, and maybe they might get behind you with it because you were more open with them and that you talked to them and you made them switch. Maybe you can change one thing. Maybe it's not get rid of the cookies, the cakes, the ice cream and the thing, but maybe we get rid of one or two of them. Maybe, like I said, maybe if we are going to still buy those things, we change where we're going to keep them in the house, right? We change the pantry, we rearrange things, the physical environment, and we change it so we're not seeing those things, right? When you go to a grocery store, all the stuff that they want you to buy is eye level for a reason. Again, this is directly your environment influencing you, right? If you go into the cereal aisle, this is the simplest one. If you go into a cereal aisle of the grocery store, the cheap non-name brand knockoff cereals, where are they? All the way on the bottom aisle, bottom row. The name brand, bright, sugary, like Kellogg's, General Mills, Frosted Flakes cereals that they really want you to buy that are $3 or $4 more expensive than the ones on the bottom. Where are they? They're right at eye level, or actually a little bit lower than our eye level, because they're at our kids' eye level. That's really where they place it. They put it on the second or third shelf so that a 7 or 8 year old will see it, and then they will bug their parent to get it. Again, what is this? This is a direct example of your environment influencing you, influencing your kids. But just in that same way, we can take that same idea and flip it and use it to our advantage at home, right? We can stack the healthier stuff in the front of the fridge so it's top of mind as soon as we open the fridge and we see like, oh, I have fresh spinach, I have fresh tomatoes, and we can put the junky stuff to the back. So I have to dig through it, and that in that moment, it gives me a moment to pause and be like, oh, well, do I really want to be going all the way to the back here and skipping over all this nice healthy goodness that I've got for myself? So using the environment, although we cannot control every aspect of it, there's a lot more that will influence us than what we have control over. That doesn't mean that we should not try, and that does not mean that it's out of our control by any stretch of the imagination. So the last thing that I'm always going to leave you with are some action steps. And this is a tough one because the first part here of doing an environmental audit is a long process. And what I mean when I say an environmental audit is I literally want you to just start to bring consciousness and awareness to our environment, to your environment on a day-to-day basis, right? Think about, as you go through your day, all of the things that you're seeing, interacting with, feeling, smelling, hearing, and just all of the things that are competing for your attention. It would be great if you had a little notebook or something like that. Again, you can use a note on your phone, but I literally want you to write this down. You should know by now, I'm big on writing things down, and I'm big on taking a moment and pausing and getting a separation, right? When my phone pings me, this is, again, I've talked to you guys about this before, a habit that I'm trying to break. That vibration, that ping, that buzz, all of that stuff is a part of my environment. When I catch myself having just closed out Facebook and now I'm opening Instagram and I'm like, I have to wait, why am I doing that? What's going on here? When I am walking to work and suddenly I am in the bakery instead of walking down the street, and I'm like, oh wait, what? I didn't even realize that happened because I smelled the thing. And now it's like, all I want to do is put some time and space in between the environmental thing and me making the decision. And I can still do whatever I'm doing, right? Again, if I see a cookie and I eat a cookie, that's fine, but I just want to take note of it. Why was that? What was it out on my counter? Did I have to go in? What was it about my environment that made it easier or harder to do it? Or on the opposite, I really wanted a cookie, but I didn't have one in my house. So I didn't get one because that would have taken me to get up, get dressed, get in a car, drive to 7-Eleven and do all these things. So I want to just write down all the different times throughout the day. And this is a multi-day thing because, again, there's literally infinite environmental inputs at any given moment. But we just want to write down all of the things that are affecting us, all of the things that are pushing us either this way or that way, pulling us towards something, the advertisements we see, right? Things we didn't even realize were advertisements, but they're again, the little thing on the top of the taxi, and the little flash across your screen or something like that you barely even notice. But the more we can start to be mindful of this stuff, the more we start to realize how powerful it all is, and that is the first step in being able to change. So as we're doing this audit as well, I want to use what's called the one thing filter, right? And we've talked about the one thing a lot already. If you don't remember, then you can go back to previous weeks, but just a little, the one thing is, what's the one thing that I need to accomplish this week that I know that everything else will be okay? That's the easiest way, right? So the one biggest goal, most important goal to move me forward for the week, right? So now when I'm doing my environmental audit, when I'm looking at the things, right? The things that are either, again, everything's either pushing or pulling. It's trying to get me to do something, trying to get me to not do something. It's trying to move me in one direction or move me in the other. Does it pass my one thing test? Is it going to move me closer to my one thing or farther away, right? If my one thing is weight loss, is that going to make me closer to losing my weight or not? If my one thing is waking up earlier, is the environment of Netflix and staying up late and watching another episode going to make me more tired and then move me farther away from my one thing of waking up at 5 a.m., or is it going to move me closer? And this is just a filter through which I can start to make these decisions. Right. So everything in my environment, again, it's either going to push me, it's going to have one of three effects. It's going to push me towards, pull me away, or it's going to be neutral. Right. Because if my thing is waking up earlier, then the cookie might not have a difference. It might make me feel sluggish, and then I would maybe sleep in or something like that. I don't know. But my point is that not everything is going to be positive or negative for your one thing, but that's how we can start to curate our environment more, right? So if I run everything through that filter, so I have the things that are moving me closer to my one thing, those are things that I want to leave and things that I want to emphasize more. I have things that are moving me away from my one thing, and those are things that I want to change about my environment. Those are places that I have room for improvement. And then I have the middle section that are kind of neutral, and that's stuff that I can either ignore for now, or I know that I could possibly improve in the future, but it's not my biggest priority, because the main priority is changing the negative drivers and turning them either neutral or positive. All right. And like I said, the reason I'm emphasizing writing all this stuff down, because it's going to be a lot, right? There's infinite things. So this is not like a 1 day thing, or it's just like, again, just having a notebook. I carry a little notebook with me all the time, and I'm just writing stuff down, taking notes, writing stuff down, taking notes. And that's really the best way to do it. Because again, you're going to be times where you just don't even realize this stuff is affecting you. And you're like, oh, wait, what the hell just happened? And like, take a second, pause, write it down, and then reassess later. And then the last thing I want you to do is literally unfollow at least 10 accounts on whatever various social media platforms that you are on, right? It could be Facebook, it could be YouTube, it could be Instagram, I don't care. TikTok, whatever your thing is, unfollow people, because I'm sure that there are people that you are following who are not serving you right now. Again, running it through your one thing filter. If my one thing is I want to be a better person, there's at least 10 people who are not making me a better person when I look at their content. There's at least 10 people who are actively making me angry when I look at their content. There's at least 10 people who I hate follow, who I just like to follow their page because it's like, oh, what's this guy up to? That's the kind of stuff that we do not need in our lives. And this comes back to the curation of the environment, that we can be more deliberate with what we're doing. So coming back to what I said before, being proactive is always going to be the answer. Doing all of this stuff ahead of time is the way to make sure that it is not a problem in that moment. And that's why we have to write everything down, because that's basically in that moment, right? So when I catch myself doing the thing that I maybe don't want to do, or I catch myself in a weird thing of like, oh, whoa, I didn't even realize I was being so affected by this. It's already too late to change it in that moment. But writing it down allows me to then go back after the fact, but before it happens again, and alter my environment, right? So to again, to make it a little bit more concrete, using the chocolate chip cookie example, if I walk by and my chocolate chip cookies are right on the counter and I just grab one, not even thinking, just unconsciously, and then I catch myself. I was like, whoa, like, why did I even eat that cookie? In that moment, it's too late. I've already eaten the cookie. The thing has happened. What I can do is be proactive for next time. The way I do that is by writing down, oh, I ate a cookie mindlessly because the cookies were sitting out on the counter. What can I do for that next time? Maybe put the cookies away, maybe have them at a higher place where they're not at eye level, maybe having it here. But the point is that we have to get to the point where we're noticing these things in the moment, so that we can then plan better for the next time that it happens. Because life is just a series of similar events reenacting themselves over and over. Most people never learn from their mistakes, or from the mistakes of that, or not even mistakes, or just from their actions. And they just let the same things happen. And they live in that reactive mode where life is happening to them. So all I'm trying to get you to do here is to start to be proactive and get to a point where you are in the driver's seat. You are not just becoming a slave to your environment, but you are making your environment work for you. And with that being said, I think I'm all done. And